A fractured nation. The tempestuous crucible of the Irish Civil War. In the wake of a hard-won independence from Great Britain, a storm of discord ripped across the nascent Irish Free State. The Anglo-Irish Treaty of 1921, a document brokered to end centuries of conflict, ignited a bitter civil war from 1922 to 1923 that fractured the spirit of a nation yearning for unity. This crucible of violence, a clash of ideals and ambitions, not only reshaped the political landscape of Ireland but also left a deep scar on the national psyche, a wound that continues to resonate in the corridors of history. The seeds of this conflict were sown in the crucible of the Irish War of Independence, 1919 to 1921. A united front, the Irish Republican Army, the IRA, had fought a guerrilla war against British rule. However, the Anglo-Irish Treaty, negotiated by a delegation led by Michael Collins, proved to be a divisive document. While it granted Ireland dominion status within the British Commonwealth, it retained certain concessions, such as an oath of allegiance to the British Crown, that rankled a significant portion of the IRA. Eamon de Valera, a charismatic leader advocating for complete independence, emerged as the figurehead of the anti-treaty faction. They believed the treaty betrayed the ideals of the Republican struggle and envisioned a fully independent Irish Republic. The pro-treaty forces, led by Collins, argued that the treaty was the best possible outcome under the circumstances and offered a path towards eventual full independence. This fundamental disagreement over the future of Ireland ignited a firestorm of debate and ultimately led to violence. The war itself unfolded in a series of brutal clashes between the newly formed Irish Free State National Army, backed by British weaponry, and the anti-treaty IRA. Guerrilla warfare tactics dominated the conflict, as the IRA, now fractured and lacking heavy weaponry, resorted to ambushes and hit-and-run attacks. The pro-treaty forces, with superior organization and firepower, gradually gained the upper hand. The war descended into a cycle of violence, with targeted assassinations and summary executions on both sides. Tragically, the former comrades in arms who had fought together against the British now found themselves locked in a bloody civil war. Beyond the battlefields, the war ignited a fierce propaganda battle. The pro-treaty forces depicted themselves as the defenders of order and stability, aiming to build a prosperous and independent Ireland within the framework of the treaty. The anti-treaty IRA portrayed themselves as the true guardians of Republican ideals, fighting for a complete severing of ties with Britain. These competing narratives further divided Irish society, creating deep fissures of animosity and distrust. The war reached a turning point in 1922 with the capture and execution of Michael Collins, a devastating blow to the pro-treaty cause. However, the tide of the war had already begun to turn in favor of the Free State forces. By the 1st of May 1923, the anti-treaty IRA leadership, facing dwindling resources and mounting casualties, ordered a ceasefire, effectively ending the conflict. The legacy of the Irish Civil War remains a complex and contested issue. For some, it was a tragic betrayal of the ideals of the independence struggle, a fratricidal conflict that left a lasting legacy of bitterness. For others, it was a necessary step towards building a stable and prosperous Irish Free State. The war undoubtedly shaped the political landscape of Ireland, with the major political parties tracing their roots back to the opposing sides of the conflict. The echoes of this tumultuous period continue to resonate in Irish society. The Civil War serves as a stark reminder of the dangers of ideological division and the enduring human cost of violence. It is a cautionary tale, urging future generations to navigate the complexities of national identity with wisdom and empathy, ensuring that the wounds of the past do not fester and reopen. The Irish Civil War stands as a tempestuous crucible in Irish history, a period of profound national trauma that both fractured and ultimately shaped the nation's future. A futile gamble, the beer hall putsch and the rise of the Nazi Party. In the tumultuous aftermath of the First World War, a fragile democracy sprouted amidst the ruins of the German Empire. The Weimar Republic, burdened by a crushing war debt and social unrest, struggled to find its footing. This political instability provided fertile ground for the rise of extremist ideologies, one of which, the National Socialist German Workers' Party, NSDAP, or Nazi Party for short, would cast a long and ominous shadow over German history. The Beer Hall Putsch of 1923, a botched attempt at seizing power, serves as a pivotal chapter in the Nazi Party's ascent, a desperate gamble that ultimately exposed its vulnerabilities yet ironically propelled it further down the path to eventual dominance. The Weimar Republic, from its inception, faced a multitude of challenges. The Treaty of Versailles, perceived as a humiliating diktat by the victorious Allied powers, fueled a simmering resentment amongst the German populace. Hyperinflation crippled the economy, plunging millions into poverty and desperation. Political instability, with a constant churn of governments, fostered a sense of disillusionment with the democratic system. It was into this cauldron of discontent that the Nazi Party emerged. Led by the charismatic yet volatile Adolf Hitler, the party offered a potent cocktail of grievances and scapegoats. Hitler, a decorated World War I veteran harboring deep resentment over Germany's defeat, skillfully exploited the economic anxieties of the working class, blaming Jewish financiers and communists for Germany's woes. His virulently racist ideology, centered on the concept of Aryan superiority, offered a twisted sense of national identity and scapegoated minorities for Germany's problems. The Nazi Party, employing mass rallies, inflammatory propaganda, and a paramilitary wing known as the Sturmabteilung, or SA, gradually gained traction. Hitler's captivating oratory resonated with a significant portion of the German population, particularly those disenfranchised by the economic hardships and perceived national humiliation. By 1923, the party, emboldened by a sense of growing power, felt the time was ripe for a bold move. The Beer Hall Putsch, a poorly planned and ultimately disastrous attempt at seizing power, unfolded in Munich on November 8, 1923. Hitler, along with General Erich Ludendorff, a decorated hero of the Great War, stormed a public gathering in a local beer hall and declared the formation of a new government. However, this audacious act of defiance lacked the necessary support to succeed. The Bavarian government, alerted to the plot, mobilized the police and army. A brief and chaotic firefight ensued, resulting in the deaths of several Nazis and police officers. The fledgling coup crumbled as quickly as it began, with Hitler and other key figures arrested. The Beer Hall Putsch, a monumental failure on the surface, had a profound impact on the Nazi Party's trajectory. While the immediate aftermath saw Hitler and his lieutenants imprisoned, the trial that followed proved to be a propaganda coup. Hitler used the courtroom as a stage, captivating the public with his venomous rhetoric and portraying himself as a martyr for the nationalist cause. His sentence of 5 years in prison, of which he only served 8 months, further fueled the image of a persecuted hero. The putsch also exposed the Nazi Party's weaknesses. The lack of popular support and the amateurish execution of the plot highlighted the party's deficiencies in organization and its inability to garner widespread support for a violent overthrow of the government. However, the failed coup also served as a turning point. The public exposure, coupled with Hitler's skillful manipulation of the trial, propelled the Nazi Party further into the national consciousness. The Beer Hall Putsch, a desperate gamble for power, served as a stark reminder of the consequences of unchecked extremism and the fragility of democracy in times of national turmoil. Though a failure on the battlefield, it inadvertently aided the Nazi Party's rise. The following years would see the Nazis refine their message, exploit the weaknesses of the Weimar Republic, and ultimately rise to power through legal means. The putsch, a footnote in military history, became a crucial chapter in the Nazi narrative, a failed prelude to a far more horrifying act: the rise of the Third Reich and the descent into the abyss of the Second World War. A land divided, the contested legacy of Mandatory Palestine. In the aftermath of the Great War's cataclysm, the embers of empires glowed faintly, casting long shadows across a reshaped world. From the ashes of the Ottoman Empire rose a land fraught with tension: Mandatory Palestine. This territory, entrusted to British administration by the League of Nations, became a crucible of conflicting aspirations. For the Jewish people, it offered a glimmer of a long-awaited homeland. For the Arab inhabitants, it represented a growing encroachment on their ancestral lands. We will explore the complexities of the Mandate period, tracing the divergent narratives that ultimately led to the fracturing of a land and the birth of a conflict that continues to cast a long shadow over the region. The seeds of the conflict were sown well before the arrival of the British Mandate. For centuries, Palestine had been a crossroads of civilizations, a land inhabited by a mosaic of ethnicities and religions. The rise of Zionism, a movement advocating for a Jewish homeland, added a new dimension to this complex tapestry. The yearning for a return to their ancestral land resonated deeply within the Jewish diaspora, particularly in the wake of escalating anti-Semitism in Europe. The British Mandate, established in the aftermath of World War I, aimed to balance these competing claims. The Balfour Declaration of 1917, a document imbued with ambiguity, expressed support for, quote, the establishment in Palestine of a national home for the Jewish people. However, it also included a crucial caveat, quote, it being clearly understood that nothing shall be done which may prejudice the civil and religious rights of existing non-Jewish communities in Palestine. This inherent contradiction laid the groundwork for future conflict. The early years of the Mandate witnessed a gradual influx of Jewish immigrants, many fleeing persecution in Europe. This demographic shift alarmed the Arab population, who perceived it as a threat to their land and way of life. Clashes between Jewish settlers and Arab residents became increasingly common, fueled by mutual fear and mistrust. The British administration, caught in the crossfire, struggled to maintain order. Their policies, often perceived as favoring the Jewish population, further stoked Arab resentment. This culminated in a series of Arab uprisings throughout the 1920s and 1930s, forcing the British to navigate a precarious path between appeasing the growing Jewish population and placating the increasingly restive Arab majority. The situation was further complicated by the emergence of competing nationalisms. The Palestinian Arabs, increasingly unified by their shared concerns, began to assert their national identity and their right to self-determination. The Jewish population, meanwhile, continued to build institutions and infrastructure, solidifying their presence in Palestine. The outbreak of the Second World War and the horrors of the Holocaust intensified the sense of urgency among Jews seeking refuge. However, the escalating violence in Palestine cast a dark shadow on the Zionist dream. The British, facing mounting pressure from both sides, ultimately proved incapable of forging a viable solution. The Mandate period ended in 1948 with the withdrawal of British forces and the creation of the State of Israel. This unilateral declaration of independence, though a watershed moment for the Jewish people, ignited a full-blown war with neighboring Arab states. The ensuing conflict, the First Arab-Israeli War, led to the displacement of hundreds of thousands of Palestinians, marking a tragic chapter in the region's history. The legacy of Mandatory Palestine remains contested. For some, it represents a missed opportunity for reconciliation and a shared future. For others, it is a narrative of betrayal and dispossession. The unresolved tensions sown during this period continue to fuel the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, a seemingly intractable struggle with profound humanitarian consequences. The saga of Mandatory Palestine serves as a stark reminder of the perils of unresolved national aspirations and the dangers of ambiguous international mandates. It highlights the enduring human cost of unaddressed grievances and the importance of acknowledging the narratives of all parties involved. As the conflict in the region continues, the echoes of the Mandate period resonate, urging a search for a solution that respects the rights and aspirations of both Israelis and Palestinians, and paves the way for a lasting peace in this troubled land. A crimson crescendo. The Red Terror in the crucible of the Russian Civil War. The embers of the Tsarist regime still glowed faintly when the Bolsheviks, fueled by revolutionary fervor, seized power in Russia in 1917. However, their triumph was far from complete. The flames of the October Revolution ignited a brutal civil war, 1917 to 1922, a saga of blood and iron that witnessed the rise of a chilling specter, the Red Terror. We will delve into the Red Terror's genesis, its monstrous machinery, and its enduring impact on the nascent Soviet state. The seeds of the Red Terror were sown in the crucible of the revolution itself. The Bolsheviks, a minority party amidst a vast and war-weary nation, faced a multitude of challenges. The deposed Tsarist elements, fueled by resentment and a desire for restoration, rallied under the banner of the White Army. Foreign powers, wary of the spread of communism, intervened with military support for the Whites. The fledgling Soviet state, caught in a pincer movement, perceived itself under existential threat. Fear morphed into a potent weapon in the hands of the Bolsheviks. In December 1917, they established the Cheka, a ruthless secret police force tasked with eliminating threats to the revolution. Felix Dzerzhinsky, a man whose icy resolve mirrored the harsh realities of the time, became its head. The Cheka, operating outside the bounds of traditional law, became the instrument of the Red Terror. The Red Terror unfolded in two distinct phases. The initial period, 1918 to 1921, was marked by a brutal campaign of mass arrests, summary executions, and torture. Suspected counter-revolutionaries, defined by an ever-expanding list, faced the Cheka's wrath. Former Tsarist officials, members of the clergy, intellectuals deemed insufficiently enthusiastic about communism, and even peasants suspected of hoarding grain, all fell victim to the Red Terror's indiscriminate violence. The justification woven into the fabric of revolutionary rhetoric revolved around the concept of the dictatorship of the proletariat. The Bolsheviks, believing in the necessity of suppressing the former ruling classes to secure the socialist revolution, saw the Red Terror as a necessary evil, a weapon to eliminate dissent and clear the path for a new social order. Propaganda portrayed the victims as enemies of the people, counter-revolutionaries plotting to reinstate Tsarist tyranny. However, the Red Terror's indiscriminate violence often extended far beyond these categories, creating an atmosphere of fear and paranoia that stifled dissent and undermined the ideals of the revolution itself. The second phase, 1921 to 1922, saw a shift in focus towards economic concerns. The Cheka, now known as the GPU, turned its attention to suppressing worker uprisings sparked by food shortages and the harsh realities of wartime communism. However, brutality remained a constant motif. The Red Terror's impact on the nascent Soviet state was profound and multifaceted. In the short term, it undoubtedly consolidated Bolshevik power. The elimination of potential challenges and the chilling effect on dissent created a climate of fear that allowed the regime to focus on winning the civil war. However, the human cost was staggering. Estimates suggest that hundreds of thousands perished at the hands of the Cheka, leaving an indelible mark on the collective psyche of the nation. The Red Terror also cast a long shadow on Soviet society. A culture of suspicion and fear permeated everyday life. The arbitrary exercise of power instilled a sense of helplessness in the populace. The erosion of trust in institutions and the suppression of dissent hampered the development of a healthy civil society. These consequences, far from solidifying the revolution, arguably fueled long-term disillusionment and ultimately contributed to the eventual collapse of the Soviet Union. The Red Terror in the Russian Civil War serves as a chilling reminder of the brutal extremes that revolutionary zeal can descend to. While the Bolsheviks justified it as a necessary evil, history offers a stark verdict. A revolution drenched in blood undermines the very ideals it seeks to uphold. The specter of the Red Terror compels us to critically examine the methods employed in the pursuit of societal change, urging a search for paths that achieve lasting progress without resorting to violence and state-sanctioned terror. It serves as a cautionary tale, echoing across the halls of history, urging revolutions to find a path illuminated by reason and justice, not a crimson tide of fear. In the next chapter, we will cover the death of Vladimir Lenin, an event that sparked a bitter power struggle between Trotsky and Joseph Stalin, as well as the publication of Adolf Hitler's so-called manifesto, Mein Kampf.